Good morning, Teller County, and all of our viewers that we have throughout Colorado and different states. And this morning I have a special guest. This is Ava Flanell. Ava's been on several times, and I'm so happy to have Ava with us because she's very knowledgeable about legislation and issues involving our gun rights.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to be back. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for tuning in and caring about the Second Amendment and what's going on here in Colorado.
You know, it's a great court decision just came out of 10th Circuit. And talking to Ava, and we've had this discussion, the 10th Circuit is really what Colorado bases its laws on. It's our 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. And here's what I'll tell you is that one of the good things that's coming out of this is it sounds like we now have challenges to the decisions based here in Colorado on our gun restrictions.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the law firm that is handling this is Mountain States Legal Foundation. They are the ones that brought on the suit along with the NRA in New Mexico, and they are also bringing on our 3-day waiting period here in Colorado.
And you know, I think it's important for our viewers to understand, as a sheriff, the one thing that bothers me is that we can't always get to your home before something happens.
Yeah.
And we've seen it time and time again, and that's the sad part is, and I think in Colorado as a sheriff, my concern is that these waiting periods, which they call a cooling off period, I don't know that they really make a difference, because when people do bad things, they already have a criminal mindset or they have a mental health issue. And those two things are the only reason why these types of bad things happen. Good people don't go and commit crimes.
Yeah.
And the 3-day waiting period to me was really kind of something that stopped good people from purchasing firearms, and sometimes to protect themselves.
Mm-hmm. No, it absolutely is, and it was. I mean, it hurt gun stores all over the state. I know just from working in my dad's store, which I, occasionally I'll stop by and I'll help behind the counter if somebody comes in. And there was one guy specifically, he was a truck driver, he was just in the area, and he was like, man, I really want to buy that rifle. It was just like, I don't know, I think it was like a 1022, just nothing crazy. And I told him, I said, okay, well, you can fill out the paperwork, we'll submit your background check, but then you have to wait 3 days before you can pick it up. And he's like, really? And he's like, when did that change? And I was like, well, it was right when it went into effect. And as a result, we lost the sale. And I think that is happening all over. They realize that, they've gotten very smart when it comes to gun control, and they're coming at us from all different areas. And they're like, okay, if we can't just outright ban guns, we are going to hurt the gun stores, that sell them and make them lose out on sales. And also, following up with what you said, there has been a statistic where people who are at the crime, at the scene, when there is an active shooter, they are more likely to stop that threat as opposed to law enforcement who shows up, even if you guys are able to get there quickly, and that's because you don't know who the victim or who the shooter is, and they already know what the situation is and who, the attacker and who to take down.
Absolutely.
So,
and, Ava, this is one of the counties that have the highest density of gun populations in the state.
Wow.
And I would say we have far less and fewer incidences of these types of issues. And I think that comes to a lot of understanding that I was once told as a young man and from the older folks that I would talk to that an armed society was a polite society. Mm-hmm. And to some degrees, that's the code of the West, right? And I think we're in Colorado. It used to be the West.
Yeah. And
it's hard now because when we look at the 3-day waiting period, and I think this is interesting, if it's no different because a firearm is an inanimate object. It's something you're purchasing and you want to hunt with it, or you want to use it for a sporting activity, or you want to use it for self-defense. It's no different than buying anything else. It becomes the behavioral issues of somebody that gets or retains a firearm that can cause issues.
Absolutely. Look at vehicles. Are we going to, look how many crimes have been, in the last year. How many people used a vehicle to kill people? So are we going to now enact a waiting period, a cooling off period before somebody can buy a vehicle? And that isn't even a right. Or, apply this to some of our other rights. Are we going to, before you can even speak or write something, publish something in the newspaper, are you going to have a 7-day cooling off period so that you don't offend anybody or, hurt somebody with your words? It doesn't make sense.
The burden imposed by a cooling-off period is brought into sharper focus when considered in the context of other constitutional rights. A carte blanche one-week cooling-off period to publish news stories? Unconstitutional. If a criminal defendant had to wait 30 days after his arraignment before he could seek legal counsel so that he would not unduly resist his prosecution? Unconstitutional. Of course. The Second Amendment is no different.
Well, and that's an interesting thing that Ava's talking about, because in the 10th Circuit decision, that was the one thing that came up, was the fact that, our Constitution allows you to bear firearms. What the 10th Circuit said was that they couldn't stop you from purchasing a firearm, because then that would stop you from having your constitutional right. So that's an important factor.
Common sense dictates that the right to bear arms requires a right to acquire arms, just as the right to free press necessarily includes the right to acquire a printing press, or the right to freely practice religion necessarily rests on a right to acquire a sacred text. Legal interpretation follows that common sense.
And then also, I'm sure that you've seen, just having these waiting periods, somebody who is in danger, they just had a really bad breakup, their significant other is, threatening them. You probably see it more than anybody that restraining orders don't work. And somebody needs to go out and get a gun. Even, okay, let's talk about COVID first. Obviously the 3-day period was not enacted then, but there was this huge waiting period because there was so many people buying guns. And I remember, helping my dad at his store, so many people were like, what do you mean I can't leave with the gun today? We need the gun, because law enforcement was saying unless it is a deadly situation that they weren't going to be showing up. And so they were like, I got to take, matters into my own hands. And that left them defenseless. You cannot leave somebody defenseless.
I think when people legislate laws into existence, or they believe those laws are going to protect them, what they don't understand is that bad people don't care about your laws. And bad people do things because they're bad. And that's a personal decision they've made. I was in Katrina when Katrina happened. And the one thing I will tell you is, having a 3-day waiting period prior to a hurricane probably wouldn't have helped anybody, right? There was a lot of looting that went on. There was a lot of issues that occurred. And how do you know when there's going to be an act of nature that now precludes you from being able to purchase that weapon? And I think these laws sometimes, although they're put in place to do something good, or what they believe and perceive as something good, the problem is that it now creates a bigger issue for those that want to protect themselves or protect their family members. I've seen a lot, in this county, I've seen a lot more new firearms owners, because now Colorado is the second highest violent crime in the United States. More people are aware of their personal safety. We have less law enforcement officers than we ever have, because people are leaving the state due to our laws and the approach towards law enforcement and going after law enforcement at a state legislative level. So how are people going to defend themselves?
Exactly.
And I think that's what everyone's concerned about. You're never going to stop people from doing those bad things. So it becomes good citizens that have to make a conscious decision to protect their own families. And I think that's the thing we're looking at.
And also, just to note, so Governor Grisham, who is the governor for New Mexico, she said that this law was put into place to save lives. On average, it would save, I think it was like 37 lives per year. What I have a problem with, though, is how many lives were put in jeopardy because of this.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would find out that statistic, but that is something that they are not thinking about as well.
When I think when you say it saved 36 lives, how do you know it saved 36 lives?
Yeah.
Right? There's no way to tell, because that means they had 36 incidences where they believe the law could have been effective. But it's almost like playing second-day quarterback, right? There's no way you would have known if that law would have stopped somebody from doing that. I think that this 10th Circuit ruling is going to have a great impact on 003, because 003 not only gives them a waiting period, but it gives them a training curriculum they have to follow. It gives them more time, and we're talking months to purchase a firearm. So if the path to purchasing that firearm is going to take so long, it inhibits somebody's constitutional rights, which I think is a very fair legal question regarding 003. And my hope is that it kills 003 on its face based on that decision.
If a citizen cannot take possession of a firearm, then his or her right to possess a firearm or to carry it away is indeed curtailed, even if, as the state claims, the curtailment is modest. That is indiscriminate dispossession, plain and simple.
Speaking of SB 003, so Mountain State Legal Foundation is also the legal organization that we've engaged for Colorado State Shooting Association to handle SB 003. I can't give too many details about that, but I think that Coloradans are going to be really happy with the news that comes out in probably the next week or so. So we do have some good news on that front in order to fight it.
Well, I'm excited, Ava. I think any citizen organization that fights for those types of laws, and really an overreach by a state government organization. You know, it's funny, I hear these things all the time about overreach and how, you know, the government's overreach. I really didn't understand it until I became a sheriff and started watching what's starting to happen now with so many different laws. And really, we see it enhanced in Colorado when we see the amount of laws that are being in place, that people really have no idea what they're actually dealing with. So I think for an organization to sue the state of Colorado on the 003 bill, it's a necessary evil. I hate to see taxpayer dollars thrown away, but it's got to be done.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the most horrific bill that Colorado has ever been hit with.
Yeah.
I think that that's fair to say. This is absolutely, I mean, the fact that people have to jump through all of these egregious hoops just to, you know, just to exercise their Second Amendment right. And not to mention what people, I think a lot of people don't realize is that this permit to purchase, it only lasts 5 years. We're assuming that it's only going to take a few months for them to obtain all of this, to, you know, jump through all of these hoops, but it might take a year. You finally are, you know, you have this little permit now to purchase these, you know, semi-auto, rifle, shotgun, gas-operated handgun, and then that only lasts a few years, and then you have to go through the whole thing again. So it's, I mean, again, they're putting these barriers. They've gotten very smart. They're coming at us from different directions in order to, okay, we can't just outright ban guns, which is what they would absolutely love to do. But instead, they're like, let's make it incredibly difficult. Let's put gun stores out of business. Let's implement a high tax. You know, let's just, again, make it as difficult as possible so that the Second Amendment will eventually go away.
And I think that's what worries me the most. It's not just always the Second Amendment, but it also, when does a government get to tell you what you own, you don't own for your own safety, right? And well, what happens when they tell you you can't buy a certain type of book, or you can't drive a certain type of car anymore, or you can't ride a motorcycle? That's what people don't understand, is that one little piece of taking away your freedoms and what you want to do in life can now change drastically how we live our lives.
Absolutely. It's a domino effect.
So they did follow the Bruin decision.
Yes.
And I think you know a little bit more about the Bruin decision, so I'll let you
so
dive into that.
If there's any historical precedent for any of these lawsuits, and that ultimately, you know, the Bruin decision was upheld. Such a great decision to come out from the Supreme Court. It's actually impacted a lot of these really crazy bills, it's actually impacted a lot of these crazy laws that have gotten struck down by the Supreme Court because of the Bruin decision. That's what they did with in New Mexico, the 10th Circuit, and they weren't able to find anything.
You know, I think for people too to understand is, even if this 003 bill is overturned, it's important to understand that this is a great challenge, a great start to overturning several different bills in Colorado. The other side of it too is that there's a lot of the excise taxes and a lot of the other issues that are occurring with different laws against firearms. But I think you have to understand something too. Even when this one gets overturned, because I believe it will, I think that lawsuit will be successful. The problem that we run into is that we have to be very wary that the legislator doesn't pass it again.
I know.
Because then that's a whole new bill, right? So right now in Colorado, the left side liberals don't have a full supermajority. If they would get the supermajority back, or even next year as we go into legislative season, they could just pass another one of these bills, which means there'd be a whole nother legal fight on our hands. They could almost pass the same bill with the same number and have it go right back into effect, and then we would have to litigate again, have it overturned. So that's why we have to be so resilient in the fact that we have to continue the fight. We have to continue trying to get the right people in offices, and we've got to start paying attention to those issues in our legislative body.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am a little concerned for the election coming up in 2026 because I think that a lot of Republicans are not going to get out and vote. They're happy with the fact that Trump is president, and they're just going to, they don't pay attention to local politics. But I've stressed so much that it all starts with local politics. Any politics is ultimately local. And if we don't start flipping seats, I mean, whether they have the supermajority or not, they still have the majority, and they're able to ram these bills through. And you're absolutely right. Let's say we fight SB 3, we're successful, they can come out with another bill, and they're going to, even if we fight it, it's going to hurt us because ultimately a lot of these lawsuits, all of these lawsuits are very expensive, and they're ultimately hoping to bankrupt us.
Yeah, and it's kind of a waiting period, right? They can just wait us out.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard part for all of Coloradoans to understand if you have a love of firearms. The other side of it too is in this next current legislation, we know that they're going to go after suppressors or sound devices. So here's the issue in Colorado, and I think across the United States. Right now, there's the ability to purchase a suppressor without having to go through all the paperwork, or that's coming. Mm-hmm. When that happens, we already have Colorado as a state legislative body saying that they are going to run a bill to outlaw suppressors fully. Now, a lot of people believe that the suppressor will make it totally silent. It doesn't do that.
No.
It just lowers the explosive sound that comes out of the firearm. And I think that's the important piece for people to understand. This isn't something that you see in the movies where it becomes totally silent. There is still a noticeable pop and sound of a firearm going off.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually, it's crazy because in other countries, it's considered the polite thing to do to put a can on your gun and quiet it down, especially if you're at a range or if you're hunting or any of that. And so it's so baffling that that people have these preconceived notions that this is what it does, because they got their knowledge from the movies. I personally question how many more bills they can come out with because, if you think about it, last year it was 14 bills I think that they ended up passing. The year before was, I want to say 10 or something. So it's just okay, how much more creative can you get? And also with all of these bills enacted, I think since 2019 we've passed almost 40 bills, 40 anti-gun bills, and yet Colorado is an all-time, it's rated highest now for crime. There's clearly no correlation. It's clearly not the guns. These laws are not working. It's doing nothing to save us except hurt law-abiding citizens.
Well, and I think that's the biggest thing we see is that crime rises in a society where there are no firearms.
Yeah.
Because, again, bad people will do what bad people do. That's what they do. So I guess that's the hard part for me is understanding why the logic says that if we take something away from good people, that the problem will just go away. Mm-hmm. And I think no problem if you allow people to do things and not hold them accountable, you will always have the issues. You have to hold people accountable. By just saying we're going to take away their firearms, I think that's counterproductive. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's going to end. I think this year is going to be a very ugly legislative season. I don't know what all will happen, but I have a feeling that we are going to face a lot of issues.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So I can't tell you enough how much I'm dreading for January to come. Because I just know it's going to be just, a fight that is just going to be nonstop like it was last year. The amount of times that I went to the Capitol fighting these bills, it honestly became a full-time job. Yeah. And I'm not even kidding. Just the amount of hours spent at the Capitol or spent even at home waiting for my turn to testify, it's outrageous.
Yeah, I would agree. That's what I ran into too, is it just became a full-time endeavor.
Yeah.
And you're 16 to 18 to 20 hours a day. So, here's the thing for all the viewers. I think 003 is going down. I think that is the good piece. Mm-hmm. That would be the best thing to happen to us in a very long time. And I think it sends a message too, that you can come up with all these things, but someone's going to stand up and fight back. And I think that is really what is starting to occur throughout the state of Colorado. And I'm so excited to see people get involved. So I want to say thank you, Ava. Thanks for coming in today. And I'm very excited. We'll see more of Ava this year, I have a feeling. And it's just always exciting to have her here talking with us.
Thank you so much.